Hey there, it's Freddie Cruz, and as you know by now, I've made it my life's mission to share with you the stories of the individuals, businesses, and organizations that make the greater Houston area great. One such organization is actually making not just Houston, but the world a better place. I'm talking about the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, and during this conversation, I'm talking to Executive Director of JDRF Southern Texas, Rick Byrd. You're going to hear about the differences between type 1 and type 2 diabetes as a baseline for starting the conversation. You're going to hear about the progress made in the search for T1D cure, and we're going to talk about a huge event happening April 13th at Hilton Americas. It's the JDRF Houston Promise Ball 2024, and you can learn about the gala as well as all things JD1 at jdrf.org/Southern Texas. This episode is brought to you by Speak Podcasting. That's my media company. If you've got an idea for a podcast, or if you've ever wanted to be a pod star, meaning if you've ever wanted to be featured on a bunch of shows, hit me up. Freddie with a Y at speakpodcasting.com. That is SPEKE podcasting.com. And if you enjoyed this episode as much as I did putting it together for you, please, by all means, share with your family and friends and hit the subscribe button at cruisethroughhtx.com.
Hi, I'm Ed Sheeran. This is Bruno Mars.
Hey, it's Katy Perry.
This is your man Flo Rida with Freddie Cruz.
This is AJ Mitchell with Freddie Cruz.
Freddie Cruz.
Freddie Cruz.
They'll let you go pick Mr. 305 and you already know what it is.
My name is Freddie, and it's time to cruise through HTX. I first learned of T1D, type 1 diabetes, when I was a kid, and it scared the pants off of me because here were people my age having to shoot themselves with needles. And that was all I knew about it back then. So for the sake of establishing a sort of baseline for the interview, what is type 1 diabetes and how is it different from the diabetes that we know in 2024?
Yeah, well, Freddie, first, I had a similar experience, probably around the same age you did, where I had a really close friend diagnosed with what now is called type 1 diabetes, and it scared me too, not knowing what I know now about the disease. So type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease, much like other autoimmune diseases that we hear of, celiac, rheumatoid arthritis, thyroid diseases, where the body's immune system attacks the cells that are supposed to be working for us and doing good. In this case, they're cells in the pancreas that produce insulin, which keep our blood sugars normal. And so for the person without type 1 diabetes, their blood sugars are hovering right around 100. So when you eat lunch, the cells kick in and your insulin's produced, and then your body's able to regulate your sugars that way. So for a type 1 diabetic, they don't have those cells working properly. And so they have to regulate that themselves through insulin after they eat, making sure that they have sugar intake, when they're exercising, to make sure that they stay in a healthy range. And unlike type 2, which is more of a metabolic disease, it has genetic components to it. The cells aren't producing insulin in an effective way, so the body's still producing insulin. It's just not being used in the way that it should. And so that's the primary difference. But with type 1 being an autoimmune disease, it can affect anybody at any time. As we say, it does not discriminate. And if you have 2 or more of the markers that are looked for, there's a chance in your lifetime that you would develop type 1 diabetes. So markers would be actually autoantibodies that are in your body. Yeah, and so we actually are huge proponents of universal screening. We believe that people need to be aware if these exist because, one, it prevents severe episodes upon diagnosis. And there's also treatments today that have been made possible through JDRF's research. As of last November, a drug called Tzield is now available that helps delay the onset of type 1 diabetes. So if you test for these autoantibodies in your system, you can use this therapy now to delay that on average for up to 3 years. And in some cases through trials, we've seen even up to a decade. So which for any type 1, having an extra day without type 1, most of them would say I'd take it in a heartbeat.
Let's talk about some of the symptoms pertaining to when it's an actual threat. Are we talking dry mouth, the breath smelling like fruit, all these other things? Are we talking like over the course of consecutive weeks?
Yeah. So it shows itself differently for everybody. In a lot of cases, some can look like it comes on suddenly, but especially as I talk to parents whose children were diagnosed, they look back and say, "Oh, I can see that now happening weeks in advance." But it's things like you just mentioned, right? It's constant thirst, frequent urination, weight loss, fatigue, and sometimes it's masked by maybe a virus, and that virus, the immune system ramps up to fight that virus, and a lot of times we'll see the impact post-virus being type 1 for those that again had those autoantibodies, and you hear a lot of times too, especially in kids, they come home from camp and they're tired, they've lost some weight, they're thirsty. It's just, they went to camp, right? And then lo and behold, they go to the doctor and their blood sugars are elevated. And then same thing with adults, right? They have these symptoms and sometimes they get misdiagnosed as type 2 because they're over 18. But half of all type 1 diagnoses every year are in adults. And so that's a misnomer in that it's not a juvenile diabetes disease. It is a disease that affects adults. I know children that were diagnosed at 10 months, and I have heard of adults diagnosed in their 70s. So it can happen really at any time.
Okay, wow. I've never heard of that as young as 10 months. I mean, when you're talking about the symptoms, it seems as though it would be, dare I say, next to impossible to diagnose a baby because, I mean, that's all they do is sleep and poop and eat.
Yeah, no, it's very scary. And I mean, in those situations, usually when they're diagnosed, it's in a critical state, rushing to the hospital, near comatose, organs potentially close to shutting down.
Okay.
Because again, it's it's hard to catch those in somebody that young. And so again, when you see those kind of symptoms, that's when we encourage go to your pediatrician and ask them if you're seeing those symptoms, even in a 10-month-old where the diaper's filling up regularly, they're losing some weight, is check the blood sugars. Let's just rule it out early on in hopes that we're not catching it when blood sugars are too high.
More of this conversation with Rick Byrd from the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation in less than 60 seconds. Cruise Through HTX is brought to you by Speak Podcasting. That's my media company. Home to shows like Beauty Unveiled, hosted by double board certified plastic surgeon Dr. Angela Sturm. During this podcast series, she shares with you stories of the people who work with her in the plastic surgery field, and she answers any questions you may have about plastic surgery. Check out Beauty Unveiled wherever you get your podcasts. What do you see in your time at JDRF Southern Texas as being one or two of the biggest obstacles for families that have a loved one that has T1D?
Yeah, so this disease is not cheap to manage. And so probably one of the biggest obstacles for the general public in whole is just accessibility and affordability, knowing where to turn, and finding those resources. And what we try to do here at JDRF is be that connector in the community. So when we get contacted by somebody who has a need, we want to be able to give them a place to turn to meet that need. We can definitely help them through some of the questions they have around management. We can help connect them to others in the community who also live with this disease, just to give them those type of firsthand experiences. But we're not medical providers, but we want to be able to turn them to people who can help. So whether they're fully insured, they don't have insurance, right, or having issues with payment, we try to give them a place to go to meet those needs. And then we also work tirelessly, especially with our federally elected officials, to make sure that insulin prices are low. You've probably seen in the news, the big pharma groups are cutting the price of insulin and capping it on a monthly basis. And we're proponents of the government putting a cap on insulin on a monthly basis. And we've gotten that through Medicare. Now we need to get through all insured individuals. And so those are two of the biggest challenges, I would say, that the general public faces when it comes to this disease, is just managing that from a financial and accessibility place.
What is unique about what you all do is there's a focus at JDRF, obviously research in the name, right? So you are the largest fundraiser in regards to research for finding a cure, but then you also have another focus, and that's building community. And it speaks to what you were just talking about with getting families connected with people who can help them with whether it's payments, whether support systems and whatnot. And then to me, it sounds like it's leaving me, if I had a loved one with T1D, that I can on my family's own accord, establish a personal relationship with our own physician. And that way you all are able to focus on the two things that you all are best at without getting into the weeds of every individual patient.
One of our pillars of our mission is around community engagement and outreach. And we accomplish that by partnering with hospitals and clinics around the city, around the country, so that in the case here in Houston, if a child is diagnosed at Texas Children's Hospital, there's resource kits that are available to them through JDRF at the hospital that provide information not only for the children, but also for the parents. It even has a cute little teddy bear in there if you're a preteen or younger, but also for teens and adults that are diagnosed. And so what that initiates then is our ability to have a volunteer, maybe a parent, maybe an adult, reach out to that other parent or other adult to say, I just learned of your diagnosis. Here's my story, and you're going to be okay. And we're going to help you through this. And so it's just that initial outreach. There's such a psychosocial burden that comes with this disease. And you'll hear from most people when they learn that they're type 1 or their child's type 1, that they feel like they're alone, they're on an island, their world just got turned upside down. So what we're trying to do is help them normalize that life again in this new world, and make them realize that, there's a community here that's going to be around them to help support them. And then from there, a lot of them decide to get involved in JDRF in some way and come to events and support and help volunteer. And so that's the cycle that we play. And then to your point, we fund a lot of research around the world, and that's where our focus really lies. Is one day we want to make this disease go away, and so that nobody has to deal with that again.
In addition to TZIL, what would you say would be another huge milestone that you've encountered, that you've seen over the past year, 2 years, 5 years, maybe?
Yeah. So first of all, there's science is progressing faster than it ever has, and we're seeing advancements start getting into clinical trials, which is the natural step before they could be approved by the FDA. So I started at JDRF 7 years ago, and at that time, the technology management tools were coming out. So you probably see the commercials on TV for continuous glucose monitors, which are devices that somebody attaches to themselves, which then monitors their blood sugar, and they can read it on their phone. Or a parent knows that my child who's spending the night at somebody else's house, I can monitor their blood sugars to make sure that everything's okay. It gives them peace of mind. And then also attached to that are what we call artificial pancreases, which are the pumps that communicate with those CGM devices that help administer insulin on a regular basis, removing the need from giving yourself shots, as you talked about earlier, watching some of your friends do and thinking about that. So that was big development in the last 5 to 10 years. Now we're moving into a state where we're really excited about what we call beta cell replacement therapies and regenerative therapies. So we have clinical trials going on around the world. We have individuals walking around with implanted beta cells in their body that are producing insulin. And they, in some cases, people who have had diabetes for decades are no longer needing to give shots. They're no longer needing to prick fingers and check their blood sugars. The downside is they're on a full body immunosuppressant. And our goal is to be able to have that therapy in place without the immunosuppressant. And so lots of studies are going on right now on how to do that, how to target the immunosuppressant without getting too deep into the science. That's where we see this going, is that there will be people walking around we hope sooner than later, without needing to carry a syringe, without needing to carry finger prick devices, without needing to wear a pump. And again, it's moving faster than we've ever seen it. So that's the most exciting thing that we have going on in our research portfolio.
Late last year, I had a chance to talk with a couple that owns and operates Tranquil Clinical Research, and it sort of bent my mind, because this is how we progress in medicine and science, is through research and the individuals that are choosing to essentially put themselves on the line and say, hey, I'll do this in the name of science and progress. And so it is just fascinating to me to hear you talking about all these things and artificial pancreas. Wow. That's something.
Yeah. I mean, if you see somebody wearing them, you might think it's a pager. I mean, it's that type of device, right? A lot of times it's sitting on your belt, but now there are some that you can wear, on your skin attached that way too. Yeah, it is. And it is the natural progression of things. And I want to mention one thing about JDRF and the way we operate is that we don't just fund academic research and then let somebody else take the next step in that. We work very closely with the research projects that we fund to help see them through to the next phase if they're viable, to help learn from others as we're doing that. But all the way through, we work then with FDA, we work with pharmaceutical companies, we work with insurance companies to make sure that whatever's coming through research and getting through clinical trials and getting approved then can be used and accessible by everybody with type 1 diabetes. And in some cases with these devices and this technology, it's benefiting type 2s as much as it's benefiting type 1s. And I have personal friends that are now wearing continuous glucose monitors who have type 2, and I remind them all the time that we help make that possible. And so it's really it's a full spectrum, not just one aspect of the research cycle.
Okay, so you talk about the technology advancing so rapidly, and my next question involves artificial intelligence and how that possibly plays a role in what you all do with regards to research and finding a cure, and what you see as its role, a bigger role, a smaller role, or pretty much the same since the past, a few years since you've started?
Yeah, I think like with all of us, AI is playing a bigger role for good and sometimes not so good. In this case, the AI that's being used is really to help learn and decipher. A great example is really before AI even became the topic that it is today. JDRF partnered with IBM to see how we could benefit from Watson. Lots of data out there from research projects, over the last 50 years. And for a human to decipher all that, it's nearly impossible. So that data then gets uploaded into Watson in this case to help pull information out where we can learn from past projects so we don't make same mistakes for future projects and learn from one another. So I think the way that AI is being used in our case is really to help us learn and grow and develop and not misstep where we've made those in the past.
On April 13th, we've got the JDRF Houston Promise Ball 2024. We're talking about T1D. We'd love to see a cure in our lifetime for this horrible disease. So can we talk about the event itself and what people can expect when they purchase their ticket?
Yeah, so our annual gala is a great party, beyond a great fundraiser. I knew about this before I started working at JDRF because I had friends that would attend, and they would actually say, it's one of the best galas that we ever go to because it's a lot of fun. It has some very emotional parts of the night, some very inspirational parts of the night, and then it culminates with a lot of fun and excitement. So like a lot of your typical galas, right? It's a dinner, it's a black tie event. It's at Hilton Americas downtown. We'll have close to 1,000 people in the ballroom, many of which have a type 1 connection, but there's a lot in that room that don't, that are there to support friends or colleagues, coworkers. And so throughout the night, we're hoping to raise $2.5 to $3 million through this year's gala alone. And we have some very generous companies and individuals that will join us. And then at the end of the night, the band Skyrocket out of Austin, they're a perennial favorite of ours, so we bring them back. We actually have people who buy tickets to our gala just to see Skyrocket. And so, so it's pretty, they're a big draw, and we have a casino night. So we'll raise a lot of money. And the nice thing is during the gala, there's a portion called Fund a Cure, and it's our paddle raise segment. All dollars that are raised during that portion of the evening through Fund a Cure, 100% tax deductible and 100% goes straight to research. They bypass all other avenues, and we get it straight to work in the community. And that really motivates a lot of people to give generously. Again, those who have a connection and those who don't.
You can learn more about the Promise Ball. You can learn more about what JDRF is doing to find a cure for type 1 diabetes. Again, hoping to see a cure in our lifetimes. You go to the website and you see the pictures of what this disease was like 50 years ago versus 2024, and the images are shocking. And hopefully, as Rick has said, sooner rather than later, we're going to see a cure, and he'll be out of work. He'll need to find a new job.
That's the goal. That's the goal. That's what I say all the time. Our job is to close our doors. And what we say is, it's not if, but when. And we're working hard to make that win a little sooner.
Fantastic. So check them out at jdrf.org/Southern Texas. Rick, he is the executive director of JDRF Southern Texas. Thank you so much for taking the time to join the show today, sir.
No, Freddie, thank you for the time, for the exposure. I hope somebody learned something new today about JDRF and type 1 diabetes.